So I was 11 years old when I first discovered magic, because I really wanted to make my English teacher, Mr. Dixon, disappear. And I didn't know any magicians at all. So my mum suggested that I write a letter to Paul Daniels, who was the most famous magician on TV at the time. I'm sure a lot of you remember Paul Daniels. But when I was 11, the internet didn't really exist in a useful way, so I didn't know his address. So I just wrote Paul Daniels, BBC London on an envelope and asked him how to make Mr. Dixon disappear. And then 2 weeks later, I received a beautifully written response from Paul Daniels, which for an 11-year-old was pretty insane. And he explained in a very cryptic way how to find a special book in my local library. So I went to the library with my mum, I found the book, and I figured out how to make Mr. Dixon disappear. And then I became obsessed with magic, and I've been doing magic ever since. So I'm now in the Magic Circle, which is the oldest magical society in the world, and I use a lot of magic thinking in my work. So I think that magic is an incredible art because it connects with people on a really kind of deep and profound level. It's a very emotional reaction when you kind of witness magic, and it really doesn't change wherever you go in the world, regardless of the language or the culture. And I think that what I love about it the most is that it can elevate simple objects to a much higher level. So with magic, a coin or a hanky or a pack of cards can become so much more than the sum of their parts when they're kind of involved in magic. And I want to share two little stories from the past about my favorite magicians. So you've probably all heard about Harry Houdini. There's this beautiful story about Houdini in the early 1900s. And Houdini would arrive at a local town to perform his magic. And when Houdini arrived, everyone would just kind of crowd together in the town square. So hundreds and hundreds of people would be there to watch. And Houdini would get locked up in several sets of handcuffs, chained up, and then bundled into a vault of the biggest bank in the town. Now, in the early 1900s, this was massive entertainment, so people would wait for hours and hours and hours outside. And it would often take Houdini 4 hours to escape from the bank vault, and the crowd would just be outside cheering the whole time. So after about 4 hours, Houdini would emerge, covered in sweat, scratches and bruises, and emerge triumphantly and having escaped from the bank vault. So there's a lot of theories now, because it was a long time ago, as to how Houdini did it. But there's a story amongst magicians saying that he actually, once he was locked into the vault, he was able to release himself from the handcuffs in the first 5 minutes. And then he just sat down and read a book for 4 hours while the crowd cheered outside. Then, after about 5 minutes before he came out, he did some push-ups and pull-ups to look a little bit sweaty, and then emerged triumphantly, creating the entirely convincing illusion of his escape. But what I love about this is that the importance Houdini placed on storytelling. At the time, there were so many magicians who were using lockpicks and other methods to escape from handcuffs, but nobody could make it into such a huge spectacle like Houdini. And that's because he understood that the magic wasn't in the lockpicks or the technology that he used. The magic was in the story that he kind of wove around it. So my absolute favorite magician in the world ever was Max Mellini. So I never got to meet him, but he was also performing in New York in the 1900s. Now, Mellini was a really strange character. He was very short, he always wore a cape, he had a hunched back, and he spoke with a really thick Polish accent. And Mellini would just wait at the bar, and he would never kind of perform unless somebody asked him to perform. So he'd wait until somebody came up to him and said, "Can I see a trick?" And then he'd reluctantly walk over to their table, borrow a top hat, because everyone had top hats in the 1900s, and then borrow a coin and cover it with the hat. And then he would try and make the coin disappear. He'd try several times and fail every time. And then the third time, he'd lift the hat, and a live chicken would just appear under the hat and just run off in the bar. Now, sometimes he would also make a large block of ice just appear, which in the 1900s was insane, because you couldn't really get ice that easily. What a lot of people don't know about Mellini is that he would often wait for hours and hours at a bar with a live chicken strapped to his back. That's why he wore a cape, and that's why he had a hunched back, because he was kind of hiding a chicken. This is all true. There's like a really beautiful book about Mellini. It's definitely worth checking out. What I love about this is, again, the importance that Mellini placed on the timing and the context. For him, he knew that somebody had to come up and ask to see a trick, otherwise it wouldn't feel as magical. And of course, who would suspect that somebody would wait for hours with a chicken strapped to their back? So I run a design and invention studio based in London called Special Projects. And we invent new products for all sorts of different people and companies. And we're really inspired by the thought process of magicians. And we're really interested in taking some of the methods that magicians use and bringing them into design. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because in many ways, magicians and designers start with the same ingredients, which is often technology. Except in magic, that technology has to be completely hidden. You can't see how it's done, otherwise it's not magic anymore. And I think that designers can learn a lot about that way of thinking. So I'm not saying that every product in the world has to be a magic trick with rabbits popping out of toasters, because even that would get boring after a while. But if you imagine a kind of scale of astonishment where at one end you've got a kind of warm, nice, fuzzy feeling, and then at the other end you've got kind of deep wonder and awe. Magicians kind of operate at this end. They like to create kind of almost miraculous events. But I think that designers can learn a lot by magicians if they try and create these fuzzy feelings in the things that they design. So there's a quote that you'll probably have all seen many times when it comes to technology and magic, and it's an Arthur C. Clarke quote. So any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You see this everywhere. But actually, I couldn't disagree more. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes in design at the moment to assume that because you have a new technology, it's automatically magical. It's just not true. So what's important is that it's not the technology that makes the magic, it's how and when it's used. And that's exactly what I just want to show you now. So what we do when we try and make a product magical is we spend a lot of time trying to find out the when and the where we're going to make it magical. So we spend a lot of time analyzing the user experience and trying to find dips in the user experience. When something goes wrong, when something's not quite right. And in all of these projects, we've kind of tried to find a dip and tried to fix it with a magical thinking. So this is a project we did with Samsung quite a few years ago. And they asked us to try and find a way of helping older adults to use and enjoy mobile phones. So at the time, if you went into a phone shop and said, I want a phone for my mother or my grandmother, these are the sorts of things they would show you. They're called silver phones. And the idea here is that they assume that smartphones are just too complicated for older people, so they just take away all the features and make these really, really simple phones. We thought that this was quite a patronizing and quite stigmatizing kind of approach. I kind of went in saying my mum's 65, and these are the sorts of phones they recommended she used. What's crazy is none of them have enough digits to even dial a number, if you have a look. So when you're old, you're only allowed 5 friends. So if you want a kind of 6th friend, you have to kind of invent a new phone or just carry 2 phones. They also all have a big red SOS button on them to remind you you're going to die any minute. And that's the button you're going to press. So I'm not saying that SOS buttons are useless, but I think as a blanket approach to kind of over 60s, it felt quite insulting for us. So we kind of really wanted to avoid this. And in order to find these dips in the experience, we went to visit a lot of people in their homes. People who lived alone, people who lived in couples, people who lived in groups. This is the Bingo Club in the Barbican in London. And really just tried to look at how they used their phones. And there was one thing in common with every single person we spoke to. Everyone was really excited when they got a new phone. Like, who isn't excited when you get a new kind of product, right, in a box? But that excitement drained away at precisely the same moment with every person we spoke to. And this video hopefully shows you why. So at the bottom, you've got Duncan, who's in his 20s. He's just opening a phone for the first time, chucks the box away, and he figures out how to use it in about 3 minutes. It's probably something that you're all familiar with. Beverly, in her 60s, on the other hand, she opens the box, and the first thing she pulls out is the manual. And she begins to read every single page of the manual. And as she kind of reads the manual, because we all know manuals are usually pretty rubbish, she gets more and more frustrated. And then after about 15 minutes, she just wants to throw the phone across the room. So if you kind of were to look at the user experience there was a massive dip. She was so excited when she got the phone, but then when she opened the box, all that excitement drained away. So we knew that that was where we had to act. And I'm going to show you 2 concepts that we came up with to solve the problem. So the first one is based on a pack of cards. So imagine you've just bought the phone, and you take the phone out of the box, and you find a pack of cards in there. Now, every card represents a different function of the phone. So you've got a really easy way of exploring the phone if you're not familiar with how to use it. So in essence, every card is an app. So I can immediately see, oh, my phone does 50 things just by exploring with my fingers. But if I tap the card on the phone, it immediately opens that app. So if I take the calculator card and tap it on the phone, the calculator will open. So it's like a really kind of analog shortcut into a digital function. Then on the back of the card, it shows you how to get there without the card. So usually it just tells you that it's about 3 clicks away, because the calculator's usually not that hard to find. But by giving them this sort of analog way into this digital problem, we were able to kind of teach them how to use the phone in a really delightful way. So the second concept we came up with was all based on books. So books are, really familiar objects that no one needs to be, you don't need to explain how to use a book. And what we did is we transformed all of the packaging of a standard phone into this set of 2 hardbound books. Now the first thing you see when you open it is the SIM card, and it tells you what it is. So you've probably never seen a SIM card before, so it tells you it's the heart and soul of your phone. Now, the next thing you see when you turn the page is where it goes in the phone. So the phone is actually kind of hidden away in the book. Then the next thing you see when you turn the page again is the battery. And step by step, it takes you through that setup process. So it's not really a magic trick, but it's quite a magical way of kind of setting up your phone. And when we tested it with people, they were actually giggling when they were setting up their phone, as opposed to wanting to kind of chuck it across the room like before. So that takes you through the setup step by step. And then the next book is all about how to use your phone, all the functions of the phone, so you'd use that more frequently. And it's really important to think about these objects and where they live, because a lot of people keep their user manuals, but they're not really designed to go anywhere, whereas books, you just know where they go. They just kind of go on your bookshelf. So in this book, we kind of reworded everything to make it very kind of approachable, but not stigmatizing. And then you put the phone actually in a secret compartment in the book. So it's like in the James Bond films when you have like a gun hidden away in a Bible. And then all of the instructions for each function of the phone point around where you have to press on the phone. So if you look at people learning from a manual, they're normally looking here, looking there. It's very kind of confusing. It's just bringing it together all in one place. So that was a project for Samsung. And it was really kind of in trying to find that dip in the experience that we could work out where to act. Another project we did with BlackBerry was about digital interruptions. So they were really keen on looking at times when phones kind of just got in the way of day-to-day life and interrupted you. So we spent a lot of time just looking at people getting interrupted. And what we found was a scenario is when you're in the middle of talking to someone and your phone just buzzes in your pocket. And you don't know if it's more important than the conversation you're having. And you kind of think, oh God, should I look at this? I don't know. So we invented a concept that would kind of create a magical solution at that moment. So if you imagine this person's in the middle of chatting to someone and their phone's buzzing in their pocket, they just put their hand in their pocket and they squeeze their phone with their fingers. And it actually embosses a 16-character message onto their finger, like a micro text message. So you can then look at that really discreetly and then just rub it away and it disappears. It's a very kind of James Bond solution. It uses microlinear actuators on the back of the phone to create a small physical display, which is like a braille display. We thought BlackBerry were going to kill us because it's quite a hard thing to make, but they actually patented it that evening. But hopefully you can see in kind of analyzing that kind of dip, we knew exactly where to act. So a lot of people ask, if you make magical products, can they become unmagical? And that's absolutely true. They definitely can, because making magical products breaks 2 of the main rules of magic, which are don't tell the secret and don't repeat the same trick twice. If you kind of give someone a magical product that they're in control of, they can keep making that thing, making that magic happen again and again, and they'll figure it out. So that's why it's really, really important to fix a real problem, because if you fix a real problem, then it's not going to get boring, because it's always going to be useful. And I think my favorite example of this, of a magical product, which is very humble, is the Apple power connector for their laptops. So this is designed so that if you kind of trip up on the cable, it will just pop out because it's kind of held there magnetically. And then when you kind of finish, you can pop it back in. It's a very kind of simple solution, but because you only interact with it at the moment that you need to interact with it, it stays magical forever. I still kind of spend hours just kind of looking at it. So again, I know, this is my life, though, so I love this. What I love about it is how many other companies who make power connectors, will have overlooked that fact, but Apple spent the time to really find that dip in the experience. So I'm just going to show you 2 last projects. This was for a startup called Cardio, and we've invented a bunch of products for them. And they asked us to create a new type of internet-connected weighing scale. So again, we set to work trying to find dips in the user experience. And to do that, we involved really different people. So we involved people who were trying to gain weight, people who were trying to lose weight. There was an elderly couple who were trying to kind of keep their cholesterol levels low. There was a pair of acrobats and someone who just had a baby. Essentially, people who had had different relationships to their weight over a period of time. And what we realized consistently is that everyone kind of hated weighing scales. It was always at this kind of similar moment. It was the moment when you look at your weight. It kind of sounds quite obvious, really. But the second you actually look at your weight, it's a bit like the weighing scale is telling you off, you know, every single day. So if you're kind of trying to get to a certain weight for maybe 3 months, this thing is going to just tell you off again and again and again. So no wonder you hate it. Also, people would get obsessed about little decimal points. You know, maybe your weight's gone up by 0.2 one day, and that might just make you have a bad day, but it was maybe just because you had a glass of water before you weighed yourself. So there was a lot of weird relationships with the number. So we basically designed a weighing scale that doesn't tell you your weight. We just got rid of the number to try and change their relationship with it. And instead of telling you your weight, it actually detects who you are. It's very good at knowing who is actually on the weighing scale, and then it knows your goal. And it essentially just shows you how well you're doing with a smiley. So basically, it translates your progress into a smile. And we've made a very complex algorithm, which is this smile gradient algorithm, which takes your weight goal and converts it into a smile. So if you're doing really well, it smiles a lot. And then if you're not doing so well, we originally had it crying as well, but we took that one out because it was a little bit nasty. But yeah, so this was, again, trying to find that dip in the experience and then solve it in a magical way. So the very last thing I want to show you was a project we actually imagined for a company like IKEA. And we were really interested in flat pack furniture because in itself it's quite a magical thing, taking a box home and just turning it into a set of shelves. But there were parts of the user experience that were overlooked, and we really set to work to try and improve them. So we love the manuals that you get with furniture, and we thought, what if we could imagine adding some missing pages to the back of those existing manuals? So one of the problems we highlighted was when you're building furniture, you're all excited, you get home, it's really you've bought tons of stuff, and then you build it, and then you're immediately just in pain, and then you can't enjoy the thing that you've built. So we imagined you've just built a bookcase. And so imagine you've put it up, and then you're like, oh, God, I'm in agony. So if you imagine these pages would be at the end of the existing user manual, and they would actually explain that you have to take the box and turn it into a impromptu yoga mat. And then we actually worked with a personal trainer to create specific stretches for that actual bit of furniture, looking at the actions people do when they lift it. And it takes you through some step-by-step stretches so that then you can enjoy your shelf. Another common problem is arguing. I mean, that was something that we kept finding again and again. And so in this example, we imagined a couple who had just bought a double bed and had just been arguing all the way through as they were building it. So again, this would appear at the end. And before you actually start building the bed, there's a cutout template which asks you to write 3 things that you love about that other person onto the template. And actually, we did have some advice from a therapist who told us this was actually a good method. And you can fold it into a little heart with some little origami folds, so that when you finish building the bed, you can then give this heart to the other person and just remember why you got it in the first place. So just in summary, I think it's really important to know that if you're trying to make magical things, don't just assume that because it has high tech in it, it's going to be magical. The technology isn't the thing that makes the magic. It's everything else around it, the story around it. If you're going to spend a lot of time on a project, devote that time to finding dips in the user experience. It's really important to know when to actually use that magic and to make it useful. And finally, if you make that magic useful, if you make practical magic, then it will always stay magical and not run out. Thank you very much.